And I think this is one of the cool things of comedy is you're able to look back on those past mistakes, and that's where the real comedy lies, because that's something that people relate to, where
Right.
they have embarrassing moments. They don't like to really talk about them, but if you shine a new light on it, then you're able to create something that people can relate to and something that's really funny.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Life Up Education TV. I'm your host Natsune. Today we have a hilarious, by the way, this is like the #1 word that all the Japanese people have such a problem pronouncing with, because we can't pronounce R and L. Well, we can pronounce R, but we can't pronounce L. And hilarious have both letters in it. Like such a difficult word for us. But
you know what? I can't pronounce anything in Japanese. I did Rosetta Stone, and all I know is onna no ko wa and konnichiwa. So that's okay.
I'm still better than you. Okay.
You're doing way better.
Okay. So so today we have a hilarious guest. Did I get it right? From America. Did you say Texas? No.
Almost. Arizona.
Okay.
Yeah.
Arizona.
I don't know if you've ever heard of it. There's nothing there except desert, cactus, and
party. College party.
Yes, that's right. Lots of party.
That makes sense. Okay, so Stephan, welcome to my show.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Is that a round of applause? Wow, what a great audience you have. This is amazing. Thank you, Natsune.
So I wanted to have you as a guest because this is something that I wanted to talk about for a while now. How can we use humor when we face adversity? This is like a very specific topic I wanted to talk about. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself so that it makes more sense for the audience why we are having this conversation together.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Stephan Settanni. I come from Arizona, close to Texas. Okay. I am nervous and trembling right now because I'm trying to live up to the expectations of hilarious guests. So I will try. Oh my gosh, I'm
fixing
shaking
your hair, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Let's fix your hair.
It's 5:30 in the morning here, so I'm also
oh my God.
shaking
Are you serious?
off. Yes.
Damn.
But you know what?
I'm sorry.
No. I booked this time because I could barely sleep. I was so excited to talk about comedy and how you can use it in adversity. And I think that I've been doing comedy for a couple of years, and I also have a comedy podcast where I bring on some of the funniest people in the country. And now I've been getting some international guests, so maybe the world. And so I've been asking them different questions on how they dissect the comedy process, and I've learned a lot of things about how you can write comedy and deliver comedy to people and be really funny. And I think one of the key ingredients of that is to learn from your mistakes. And I don't know if you watch comedy or if your fans watch comedy a lot, but I don't think there have been
American Dad. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, really? Do you have any favorite comedians? Not to put you on the spot. That's fine if you don't. Stephan from Texas. That's who it is.
Hold on. I do have this one comedian, and that's mostly because, so I don't know if you can tell, but probably you can tell. I'm not native English speaker, right? Like I had to learn English, and then because I grew up in Japanese culture, like comedy, right? Like the comedy is super subjective, and especially depend on the culture as well, right? Like where you're brought up. And for me to get that American like humor, it took me a while. But there was one comedian that I could get when I was still kind of like learning the culture, and his name was Louis C.K. or something like that, like Louis.
Oh yes, Louis C.K.
Louis C.K. Yeah,
a little older gentleman, slightly bald.
Yep.
Little goatee. Yeah.
He had this story about his dog
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I'm not gonna try to do it because I don't know if I can make people laugh. But basically, I don't know what it was, but that time, like, I didn't understand English like that fluently. Like my level, so let's say my level right now of my English is like 70%, or listening, let's say listening is 90%. Well, I would say like 100% almost. But
Yeah. Oh
let's
yeah.
be humble, and I'm just gonna say 90. Then
No, no, no. You know, be confident. 100%. It's great. So far, you've been laughing at all my jokes. So I don't know if that's because you think I'm funny or just faking it. But you know what? I'll give you
make
100.
it to make it. No, but so the thing is, like, I understand quite well now. But at the
Uh-huh.
time, let's say my listening was like 30%, 40 even, like something like that, like low.
Right.
But I still understood it. And I don't know what it was. It was probably because it was less of a culture thing because it was talking about dog. But I guess without the context, it's kind of really hard to investigate what it was. So I'm just gonna move on,
that's
write it on. But yeah,
that's
that's that comedian that I liked. That
very nice. Well, I don't know if you've heard, but Louis C.K. has gotten in quite a bit of trouble. So
oh really?
that's another story. Yeah, that's another story for another podcast.
Okay.
But it is interesting that you say that because learning languages, there are two things, and your English is spectacular, by the way. But learning
Even though I
languages,
can't
there.
pronounce hilarious. Okay, sorry.
Hey,
I
no,
decided it.
no judgment here. I think you speak great. I speak no Japanese, so
Thank you.
you're doing awesome.
I'm fixing
But
French. Okay.
there are two things that don't have a logical sense to them when you learn another language,
Mm-hmm.
and one of them is prepositions. The other one is humor,
Mm.
and it's just so subjective, and a lot of it depends on the culture,
Mm-hmm.
and it can be different from country to country. I speak Italian fluently, and I
Oh.
also speak Portuguese. And Italian because my family's Italian, and then Portuguese because I married a Brazilian, and I was learning Portuguese, and I have some comedy where I talk about some of my failures
Mm.
learning the language and speaking the language. And in fact, I'll keep it short, but one of my bits I talk about when I go over to Brazil
Mm-hmm.
and I meet my wife's family who still lives in Brazil.
Mm.
And I end up, my wife wants me to spend some quality time with her father. So she sends us grocery shopping.
Mm-hmm.
And then they write the list for us, her mom and her. And so we go to the grocery store, and
Mm-hmm.
my father-in-law, he ends up leaving me at the grocery store. He goes to go get something, and then he leaves me, and I have to go ask people what the things are on the or where they are. And so I ask everybody. I feel so accomplished,
Mm.
and I ask, and then I fill up the cart, and I tell my father-in-law, I have the whole cart filled. The only thing I'm missing is this. And when I said this in Portuguese, the actual word in Portuguese was cornmeal, but the word that I had used was buttholes. And so I had accidentally and he looked at me like, what are you talking about? And then I just realized that I had asked the entire store, where are your buttholes? So obviously I wasn't allowed in that store again. There's a picture of my face. Do not let him in. But that was a huge failure. I was very embarrassed. And I think this is one of the cool things of comedy is you're able to look back on those past mistakes. And that's where the real comedy lies, because that's something that people relate to, where
Right.
they have embarrassing moments. They don't like to really talk about them. But if you shine a new light on it,
Mm-hmm.
then you're able to create something that people can relate to and something that's really funny.
Mm.
So it's
So,
because if everything had gone right, I wouldn't
mhm.
be up on stage saying, oh, I went to a grocery store and I got everything because I speak Portuguese so well, tee-hee, and nobody would laugh at me. They'd be like, wow, okay, you're bragging. Okay, all right,
Right.
cocky
Mm-hmm.
much.
Mm-hmm.
So
That is
it's
true.
funny how those mistakes can have a comedic flavor to them.
Mm. See, when I think about the humor, for example, like two words that came up to my mind. This is according to some of the previous discussion I had with other people. But you know,
Yeah.
there's like, I often fight against the cynicism, right? But I think there might be some sort of like connection between why humor happened versus like cynicism a little bit, right? So it's like, it's all depend on like how you use it, kind of thing. And then another thing I wanted to say is like, like humor, like, you know, there's vulnerability attached to humor as well. Like you said, like if you are to say like, look at me, like I'm smart, I don't have any flaw, like, you know, I'm perfect, like I don't have anything to make fun being made fun of, then people would be like, oh, I can't relate with that, right? Like people
Yeah.
relate with each other when they're vulnerable, like when they can have the empathy for you, you know what I mean? So
Yes.
these two words kind of came up to my mind. And I think personally, I love humor. Like I love to laugh. And actually, this is fun. I found this my success note that I kept from like 6 or 7 years ago yesterday, and I look at it, and then right here it says, "Always be happy. Laugh at least 3 times during a day." So laughing has been such a big part of my life for a very long time, and naturally I like laughing, but I never intellectually thought about humor in that way, you know what I mean? So from your take, where do you think this cynicism and then this like vulnerability fit in or lay in the humor, the utilization of humor? And also, how can we make a use of it in a healthy way when we face adversity and failures? Is it
Right.
too high level?
Right. I mean, I think there's another thing with humor
Okay.
where I don't know if you've heard of this term, but there can be comedians that are hack. And hack is more something of if you do something that's already been done before, it's going for cheap laughs, and it just doesn't really distinguish you as a comedian. And I think to be able to be distinguished as a comedian, some things that I've heard from, there's a comedian named Steve Trevino, and I think he started out on Mind of Mencia, which was a very popular comedy show with Carlos Mencia. And then he ended up going off doing his own thing. He got a special on Showtime, and then he got another special on Netflix and ended up self-producing his specials after that. And a lot of his comedy is around things that happen with he and his wife. And so he was telling me that where he starts with his comedy is vulnerability and emotion. He says, if I don't have an emotion behind what I'm writing, it's probably not going to be authentic, and it's probably not going to be funny. So he talks about different things where he fights with his wife, and part of it is things that he has done wrong. And so when he writes about that, he's becoming vulnerable, and a lot of comedians do this as well, is where they write, and when they do write, they try and write to appeal to both sides of their audience, whether that's men and women in the case of a fight, or sometimes politics, looking at both sides, because you don't just want one side laughing. You're looking for all sides to laugh. And I think that you put a little bit of vulnerability if it's a story about yourself, where you also want to be likable in the sense of you don't want to appear above somebody or appear cocky or distance yourself from the audience. So really, when you're talking about yourself, I feel like there's a lot of vulnerability. A lot of comics, they might, if there's something about them that stands out, they'll make fun of it right there. I've had a comedian, his name is Brad Williams, and he's been on Netflix on the show The Degenerates, which highlights a lot of very crass comedians, but he's a dwarf, so he's a little shorter than a lot of us, and he talks about that a lot in his comedy. There's another comedian that I had interviewed, Josh Blue, and he has cerebral palsy. and he talks about that a lot. That I feel like that is being super vulnerable on stage, where you, if you have a disability or if there's something different about you, and you are bringing that to light in front of a crowd of people, then that's showing true vulnerability. Now with cynicism, I wanted to ask about that. Is you're saying, or you're asking, is there a connection with comedy and then avoiding that inner critique of saying I'm not good enough, or
like
what we're
there's a way to, like, for example, okay, so the whole time when we were having this conversation, I wanted to bring this out so much, and I think like in the context of, so I come from more like a business environment, you know, like in a daily basis, who I interact and everything like that is very much a business environment. And I think people get caught up in this like egoistic view of themselves, and they're scared, afraid of being made fun of in that sense, right? Like they just don't want to be, they don't want to look stupid, they don't want to look like below someone, you know what I mean? Like there's this game that they play. And you know, Jeff Bezos, the Amazon CEO, one time when he failed, like a very big project, he lost a lot of money, and I forgot, I think it's Washington Post or something, right? Like the media came out to ask him about that, about his failure, and his response was like, if you think that was like, you know, the biggest failure of Amazon, like we're about to make even more, like even bigger failure in the future, because he's like not afraid, you know what I mean? And that's like a good usage of like burn, like you said, coming back to your point, like it's like, you know, he kind of shows he understands how to turn around the narration around his vulnerability. And also, you know, cynicism in a sense that in this case, it's not necessarily directly applicable in this case, but cynicism, when I say cynicism, it's like, you know, there's a practicality in everything. So even if I say, I want to be this and that, like even if I'm the dreamer, and if I say like I want to be, let's say, like a national television host, and then if someone, a hater, comes to me, and if they be like, but you're not, right? But maybe this person's intent is kind of like portion of it is to kind of cause a laugh to some degree, right? Make fun of me or something like that, right? And then it's like practical. Yeah, I'm not, you know what I mean? And for me, my approach is always like, I like to stay practical. That's because I don't want to be burnable at the same time. Like I feel like I don't just go with positivity. I also understand the practicality. I also roll with practicality because I come from business background, and I understand that things are just how they are, right? So in that sense, like I think in humor, people simply make a statement of the fact or the reality, and then the laugh is caused. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. And I think something interesting about cynics is, and God, comedians, we get rejected all the time. There are a lot of cynics, and a lot of people. I mean, if you think about it, if you're a stand-up comedian, you are asking for your audience's approval practically every 15 seconds. You're asking for a laugh. And when you see somebody up on stage that's made it to TV, they're doing something on Netflix, etc., the work that's gone behind that, the countless times that they've gone to open mics or practice that material and they haven't gotten laughs. Maybe the first time they got one or two, and then they work on that material, build it up to be something great. It's really interesting because there are open mics here in the United States where it's rough. You go there. I would almost not recommend going as an audience member. You would go if you're a comic and you're trying to practice material, and that's the point of it. So you're getting used to rejection, you're getting used to a little bit cynicism, and I think it's something that is tough for comedians, because I think you get used to it a little bit. You get numb to not getting a laugh. But there might be a little sting that remains with you. But for me, what I've been doing, because I also, when I've started putting guests on my show about a year ago, and I've been able to get some amazing ones. And I think I battled the inner cynic inside that's saying, well, who the heck are you to get this person? And then I also got really nervous because I'm thinking, oh, I'm bringing on some of the funniest people in the country, and who am I to make, they're way funnier than I am. I'm not going to make them laugh. And so I had to battle that a little bit. But then for getting past that, I think just practice and trying to do as many, especially in quarantine. I have had the fortune of being able to get some really good people and a lot. So I would do maybe 5-6 podcasts a week. And then, so I'd get practice and I'd start to build up my confidence a little bit. And then also just trying to change my mindset, which I think is the hardest thing that I've had to do. And from my inner self saying, hey, you're not funny enough, you're not good enough, etc. And starting to change that and saying, you know what, you are. And I've had feedback, both good and bad, fortunately more good than bad, where family, friends, fans, people write and say, hey, that episode was great, that was awesome, really funny. Or some cases, that episode was really rough. And you just have to kind of take it. And I see myself going towards my main goals, being the mountain, and understanding what types of actions, things I say yes to, whether it's guesting on a podcast or whatever, or even thoughts, accepting thoughts or hearing thoughts of others, where I'm not totally blind or deaf to feedback, especially if it's negative. But if I carry that with me, will that delay me in going farther up on this metaphorical mountain, aka my goals? That was a very long way of answering your question and a little bit of a journey. So I hope that made sense.
No, but I love that. I completely agree with you. Like I'm complete, my whole life is all about production. Like I don't do well. I don't dwell on my losses and failures. I always focus on producing something. I always focus on creation.
Nice.
So I completely agree with you. And actually that lead me to my next question. So how can, like, you being a playful person help you to be happy and successful? And I think I will give you a little bit more context. Like earlier when I said cynicism, like how can we utilize humor in looking at adversity, right? And the reason I brought up the story of Jeff Bezos, for example, like, you know, we are using, I guess, cynicism as in, like, you know, so this is the way I describe cynicism. I don't know if cynicism is a good word for it, but basically when I look at something, like I said, I have the capacity to look at everything from like business mindset, like logical thinking. And so I don't necessarily get blinded, like you said, about the negativity of it or about the fact of what is actually going on, right? So negativity, you know, there's also a quote, it goes, negativity is normal, it's not successful, but it's normal. And I very much resonate with that, right? And for me, the way I look at it is, successful people are not the one that's lucky, that got lucky. They choose to stay strong regardless of the adversity, regardless of the hardships that they meet. And for us to navigate through that journey of taking so much rejection, so much adversities, like let's use humor on our failures, right? And when we use the failure, when we use that humor on our failure, maybe there's some, like, you know, cynical humor that we can kind of like change the narration of what actually happened. So, you know, in the case of Jeff Bezos, like he understands clearly at this point, like he understands what went on, right? Like he's practical.
Yeah.
But at the same token, he completely changed that to another narration in his head. to
Mm.
help him keep going. So he's not dwelling on the fact. He's not dwelling on the losses, right? So in that perspective, like what would be your answer to my question of like how can be playful person help you to be successful in life? And I guess my another question, following up question is like, I guess I want to understand if there's a healthy way to use cynicism. Is it a good word? I don't know, but cynicism in a healthy way, using a humor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I understand. And I think the a good way to do that is to like say, oh, I'm so sorry.
No worries.
That's usually when I wake up, just
Oh,
FYI.
I see.
Oh,
I like. By the way, I'm really grateful that you're here with me today.
oh no, oh thank you. I'm really grateful too. I love jumping on podcasts, especially if it's to talk about being a better person.
Mm.
So I need to learn a lot about that. It's strange that I'm talking about it. So no, but I was just gonna say, so for cynicism, I think that I had talked about it a little bit before,
Mhm.
how and let me know if I'm not answering the question correctly.
No
But
worries.
I
Yeah.
think that, so that example of Jeff Bezos, how he had taken what one might consider a failure, and then he had knocked it on and said, oh, we're going to fail a bunch of times.
Yeah.
And putting a pretty important point on saying, maybe this is what I interpreted from it, is we're going to fail all the time. That's how we move forward. You fail quickly, and then you get up and you learn. And I think that through comedy, ways that you can kind of overcome failure, instead of having it something that just lingers and stays with you as a bad memory, comedy, I feel like what you can do is you can flip the script, and
Mm.
then it becomes something that you, if you find the humor in it, I feel like each bad event is like this little comedy gold mine, and
Mm.
you just gotta pick away. And then once you find those gems, you're able to come back and almost look at the memory a little fondly, instead of looking back at it and going, cringing a little bit and being like, oh yeah, that was bad. And
Mm.
so I, sometimes it's weird, sometimes it's happened naturally, where things have happened. Maybe I got in a fight with my wife over absolutely nothing. And so that's something that we end up telling our friends. We got in a fight over a toilet seat. And so that turns out being something funny that we can look back on, instead of, oh my gosh, do you remember that time we fought about that, or
Mm.
and get angry at each other, and continue to fight about a toilet seat. It becomes the toilet seat saga of 2020. But anyway, that, I think different moments like that, or even in business,
Mm.
I think it maybe it will take a little bit more time. I think with business, and if you're working in a corporate setting, it might be a little bit more difficult, because there's that, if you're working with colleagues and you're working with a boss, it might be a little bit more high pressure. And that's something, I don't have a yearly review with my wife where I say, okay, you did okay here, you're really excelling in cooking, but but in communication you're a little low. So that might be a little different, but I think there are ways that you can try and look at the funny side of things, where if maybe you do mess up on a report or something, you
Mm.
could think, just be aware of your thoughts, because I think those thoughts happen sometimes, where you're like, well, at least I didn't break the computer, or I don't know, whatever comes to your mind. Be aware of that, and I would say write about it, because that's how a lot of comedians come up with their comedic material, is writing every single day. So if you have something that is really impacting you in a way that it's making you feel bad,
Mm.
write about it, and then try, not even writing about it in a funny way, just write about it and then read it another time, and then think about, okay, wow, this, I could see it could be funny here, here, here. So
Mm.
I think all those ways could help.
It's
I don't know if
almost
that
like
answered the question.
looking at the situation from the third person's perspective versus like you looking at it from your perspective, right? I see.
Yes.
It takes
Yes.
humility too, right? Like it takes humility, and humility is something that I talk about a lot because it goes very hand in hand with entrepreneurship. Like I
Mhm.
often believe that the moment you hallucinate you're someone, you're done as an entrepreneur because you're too soft. Like entrepreneur, like when you're entrepreneur, like you need to be ready. Like you need to, if you needed to go on the street and put up the sign to attract the customer, if you're too good to do that, you're too soft to run your business because there's no guarantee in life. Like there's no guarantee in business. Like one day, if you
Mhm.
can't do that, you can go out of business. You know what I mean? And some entrepreneur very much forget that as they like climb up the ladder too, and then they become too fancy of their lifestyle and start hallucinating that they're someone. You know what I mean? So I talk
Yes.
a lot about humility, and I think humor is another tool. I would almost describe it as a tool also, like in terms of mindset. It's like, one narration I use often is like, no one cares, right? Because I have this humility, I understand that it's me obsessing over myself. Like no one gives a fuck about my life. No one gives a fuck about like my failure, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. So I think it was a really good interview overall. Thank you very much for waking up early for me. And
Oh God, I'm so glad it was okay. Do I get a 9 out of 10?
oh
This
yeah, it's
was
11. I mean more like 100
oh
out of 10. Like
this was no,
where's
this
your
was
battle?
really.
Where's your battle?
uh, this
It was
was
amazing.
no, this was a fantastic interview. I mean,
It was fun.
I am I do have a lot of friends and a lot of people from different countries that English is not their first language, and I have to say your English is fan freaking tastic. If you want to have that as a testimonial, I'll
Thank
quote
you.
that. But no, it is
Thank you
really
so much.
good, and
I
it's just so
appreciate it.
amazing that we are able to speak with you all the way over in Japan, and
Yeah,
then
it's
me.
crazy to think about it.
It's
For
really,
sure.
what time is it over there, by the way? I'm sure it's late.
It's 10. It's not late for me. I actually have
Oh,
to
okay.
make more videos after this, so it's not a
Oh my
late
gosh.
night. I'm a
Oh
night
my
night
god.
owl. But before I let you go though, let's make sure we mention where people can find you too. Find your
Oh,
hilarious materials.
oh yes, absolutely. So if you guys want to find me, you can find me on Instagram. I've got my handle. I'll just plug the podcast because my last name is Settanni and people usually can't spell that. But if you look on Instagram at a comedy advice podcast, you can find me there. You can also, if you search for a comedy advice podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, you'll find me there. You'll see me with a mic going ha, like it's really funny, showing how much fun you're gonna have. And basically what it is I bring comedians that have been on the Joe Rogan podcast or Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, whatever, bring them along. We talk a little bit about them, and then we give really terrible advice it's a satirical way, but it's a lot of fun.
Mm,
And you can find Instagram or a comedyadvicepodcast.com, at Twitter a comedy podcast. So that's great if you want to listen. That would make my day. My heart will throb with joy. And then if you want to follow me my personal on Instagram is at Settanni. So
perfect.
that,
I'll make sure to list all of them on the. And by the
oh,
way,
thank you.
good job on choosing the name. It's like really like straightforward, like good SEO, like shit.
Thank you. SEO is what I do for my
Oh,
day
I see.
job. And I ended up rebranding because it was a really dumb name before that. And I ended up changing the name because nobody could spell it, speak it, remember it. So I was like, you know what? I got to go real simple comedy advice podcast. So
Amazing. Well, Stefan, thank you very much for coming in on today. And everyone, thank you very much for watching today. And I'll see you guys next time.
all right. Thank you, Natsune. Thank you.